I think for a lot of listeners, that the handbook's something that they're going to grow into. They probably aren't going to fork over a huge amount of time and money to be able to get it done right away. A lot of times, just because they've even thought about any of that stuff, and there's not a protocol, so they'd have to be making new protocols from thin air to be able to do that. But I think something that people I think are interested in is how they manage all this. Obviously, it's great to outsource it. It's great to have someone full time on, but even that's a lot for one person to manage. And so, a huge piece of this, just like with other parts of our business, is software that allows you to store all this information, and it makes it easier to execute on a termination and getting out PTO or vacation time, billing, tracking hours, just all of this stuff can be done through software. And you're versed in several pieces of software. And I am very interested because I love software, but I'm not very versed in the HR aspect. I'm familiar, but I'm not well versed. So I want to hear, let's talk about like that, less than 10 employees. What's a good software tool that they can use to really manage their HR processes, from payroll to benefits to tracking time, um, and any other policies, signing forms and contracts, all that kind of stuff?
That's a great question. So, and I've worked with several. So there is a difference between a PEO, I believe it's professional employer organization, which is essentially like a baby HRIS system, which HR information system. And those HRIS systems, as I think we were discussing a little earlier, but they can be a little more costly, right? With ADP, pretty exorbitant. And just between us, I'm not a huge fan of ADP. But although I've worked with it and I'm well versed in it, but I'm well versed in the PEOs as well. So there's PEOs that are much more cost friendly, and some of those are, for example, Gusto. There's also Rippling. There's Bamboo HR. So some of those are best for some of those 10 or 15 employee organizations. There's also HiBob. A lot of people haven't heard of that one, but it's really fantastic. And so that one, actually, I believe all of them, you can purchase the different modules. You don't have to have the whole package. So if
Mhm.
you're not offering benefits, you can just do the payroll through it. And maybe you can see your W-2s and pay stubs in it, kind of thing. So, and maybe it does PTO. So that's the nice thing about those, is they're much more cost effective, and you can kind of pick and choose which items you would like to have in there.
Okay, excellent. And I guess my next question is, can you give us a sense of pricing around all this stuff? Like, if we're just starting out, what is it going to cost us to work with an outsourced HR person? What should we be expect? What's something we can budget for to realistically get the help we need to implement systems for our HR, and then all the way to maybe like software? What is that going to look and cost?
So that's a good question. Some of those softwares, depending on what you're using, they will have you pay per, what is it? Per employee per month, PEPM. And that might just be a couple dollars per employee per month. And then, but you're paying like I don't know, maybe around 10,000 or so upfront, something, and maybe less. And I do specialize in implementations and integrations, by the way. So
Okay.
I have worked with vendors as far as um, not just demoing, but putting together presentations for owners of companies to say, hey, here are the features of this. Here's a chart on all the features of the different ones. Here's the pros and cons of each one. And here are the prices between them, so that you can make an effective decision there. As far as the consulting aspect, I try to tailor that to how big is your company? What are your needs? I tend to work with folks as far as being on call. I can do an hourly rate. Maybe that's $100 to $200 an hour. And maybe there's a minimum of hours that I work for you. I would make sure to quantify that in the contracts that we have, so that you have that expectation that you're getting at least this many hours from me. Or we can just do this hourly rate, and go from there if I'm just reviewing things occasionally. There's also, as far as pricing of, let's say, a handbook, it can start from maybe it's a smaller handbook, and I am creating that for you. It could be, anywhere from 500 to 1,000, even for the most robust. So, yeah, so I would say each project is a little different. And let's say I'm doing job descriptions, right? And we want something that's robust, but I would say starting around $50 a job description, and I would review that over time. I would also let the employer know as it needs to be updated, and we establish that kind of relationship. So it can vary obviously between each of those items. Are you wanting me to keep reviewing this? Are you wanting just this right now and we'll come back to it later? Or are you wanting me to be on call? So, but those are some of kind of the starting ranges for each of at least my services.
No, that's great. That's great. Um, and I think that's something that people can get with and understand how they can grow into for sure. But like Martin and I talk about all the time, especially for the people that don't have a lot of employees as starters, like labor becomes their biggest cost at a certain point when they start
Of course.
adding. And you have to make sure that you're charging and getting a profit, because if you're not doing that at the small size and then you start to grow, you're not going to be able to afford things like this. You're not going to be able, and you're going to be stressed out constantly, and you're going to be losing money essentially. So something we always talk about, and being able to do this is having a profit allows you to be able to do it. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
Well, and that's why HR, I think, even just if you're having a consultant, becomes so important, because you need to look at the long term instead of like, okay, oh gosh, I have some of these expenses up front to get some of these things done. I'd rather put this off. But if you put it off, like we talked about earlier, and let's say someone resigns, they're unhappy, or you have to terminate somebody, then you have all these costs later because you didn't set these guidelines. You didn't have these policies in place. You didn't set these expectations. Now they're filing for unemployment. Now they're filing this wrongful termination suit, and you're ending up, or you didn't have a consultant look at, like I said, your benefits that you're offering or your state expectations, and you didn't know that you're supposed to be going through this avenue to do XYZ. You end up paying all these exorbitant fines that you could have avoided if you had had somebody just review or just be on call for some of these items. So it's in HR, it's definitely about looking at that long term, and it may cost just a little upfront, but it's certainly better than paying the fines that can come out of, and the lawsuit money and settlements that can come out of not having it.